If you like this channel and what I do here, please help to support my work by checking out one of my books, available from Lulu Publishing and Amazon.com. Thank you. Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness, joined today again by Andrew Johnson. How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad, Carl. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, before we get going, I just want to remind people to check out Andrew's stuff. Basically, go over and visit his website, checktheevidence.com. Got a YouTube channel as well. Got some great stuff just recently put up about 9/11 that's worth checking out. There's also cvpandemicinvestigation.com as well, worth checking out. Some really, really interesting, useful stuff there for current times, well worth taking the time to look at. But we've got together today. We probably will end up going down some very, very strange rabbit holes with this one, because we watched 3 episodes of The Twilight Zone from the 1980s. 1985 specifically, the series came out. And before we get going, I just wanted to ask you, what's your initial sort of introduction to this series? No, I mean, maybe the original Twilight Zone as well, but specifically the 80s one, because I didn't realize it didn't come over to the UK until about 1987. I didn't realize that when I was doing some research on it. So
yeah, I mean, it's something you know, I only came across, I think, just on a late night slot one time. At that time, if it was 87 when it you know, when it came out in the UK, I was living in I was either living in Rugby or I was living in Nottingham by then, and in fact, it might have been I saw it when I lived in Nottingham, but I think it was when I was still living in Rugby. So I just came across it on late night sort of thing, and I thought, well, they've redone the Twilight Zone, and I think perhaps like yourself, I couldn't really work out whether I thought it was any better than the 60s one, you know. Or whether it was, you know, not as good, or I couldn't really decide on that overall. Yeah. But I think it, you know, it did benefit from being in colour, and I think they obviously adapted it, didn't they? So they had some very short story episodes.
Very much so. Some of them are only like 8 minutes long, aren't they? Some of them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think some of that was okay, worked out okay, and some of it, well, so what kind of thing. The story's got to be so short, you thought kind of, well, so what, almost, you know. But overall, I enjoyed watching it. I did make a point of trying to watch it, and I think this was in the early days when I got my first video recorder. You know, I'd actually managed to save up enough money to buy one, and so I would have recorded it and watched it like later evening or something like that on a later evening. So yeah, it's definitely worth recording for my interest, you know.
It's an unusual series because it tends to be much more into the fantasy realm than science fiction, but there is a lot of science fiction in it as well. I think that the original sort of 50s, 60s one had more science fiction than this one. This, as I understand it, this came off the back of the Twilight Zone movie that Spielberg put together, which I know there were other directors involved in it, but I think it was very much Spielberg's project. That didn't do so well. I think it was about 83, 84, something like that, wasn't it? When that came
I think
out?
you're right. Yeah.
Obviously, they'd had that accident with that killed the actor Vic Morrow in the film as well. And I think there was a Vietnamese boy as well, or something like that, that died. So it kind of, there was like those Hollywood curses type things with certain films hung over it a bit. It didn't do particularly well at the box office. And I think they'd already greenlit the series at that point, but there was very much a thinking of, Spielberg would get involved with this. Spielberg actually wasn't involved, but he did Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories around about the same time for a different network. So I can't remember the name of the chap. Just bear with me 1 second. I think it was something like Philip de Geer. I can't pronounce
Philip de Geer.
Philip de Geer. Yeah.
I remember seeing that name. Yeah,
he was the lead chap on it, and they made it quite dark, and they were planning on it being sort of a family night, family sort of show, sort of early evening, mid evening thing. And as it went on, they found very much that they were having to put it on later, which might explain why we in the UK, when it came along, was hidden in that late nights, because I always remember watching it quite late in the evening. So
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, some of the stories are sort of more adult, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I think very few of them would have worked for a younger audience from the ones that I've watched. I think because I've been rewatching it since we had this conversation a few weeks ago, and yeah, you know, and it is definitely an adult themes. So you know, there's no question about that. And yeah, so really, it was. I think it was. Some of the stories were as good as the original episodes, maybe.
I think so.
And
Some were,
some,
yeah,
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 yeah.
and
Some interesting
some,
stories, yeah. And
yeah,
there's a lot to choose from because, as I said to you, I could have put at least a dozen or so for choosing to talk about. It was a bit of a veritable feast, really, you know, in terms of what we could look at. But trying to sort of keep this sort of, you know, condensed down a little bit time wise, because we want to touch on some other things to do with the Twilight Zone as well. I don't know if you wanted to sort of, maybe we could just talk a little bit about some of the strangeness surrounding the Twilight Zone first before we get into our specific episodes, because there are a few bits and pieces that you reminded me of that I'd done with my research.
yeah.
One was the one of the Rothschilds that worked on the show. We'll talk about the Grateful Dead in a second as well, because that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is. But so this is some things I've got. This is from way back when I was writing my books and that. Did you? I noticed the logo on the end of the episodes, Persistence of Vision, with the 7 duplicate pyramids with the all-seeing eye in the center.
Yeah,
obviously an image that's associated with
yeah.
Freemasonry and other things.
And I even remember that, you know, from when I saw it originally.
Yeah.
I remember that those images. Think, oh, that's a really quite an interesting image. I didn't know anything about it back in the 80s. And you've pointed out another little thing I'd missed, which there were 7 of them. I didn't bother to count the number of like shadows.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, the production company was called Persistence of Vision, but I've been able to find out very, very little about it. Who was involved with it and whatnot. But what is interesting is this chap, Richard Luke Rothschild, who appears in quite a lot of the credits at the end. He was the first assistant director on the 80s Twilight Zone. This might pique your interest in. I tried to look into some of the other projects that he'd worked on, and it was just a general look that I did for it. But he worked on The Truman Show. He worked on Omen 2. And he worked on a documentary film called The Path to 9/11.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting, yeah.
And he is a legit bona fide Rothschild. He is probably not one of the main ones, you know, but he is related. You know, he is from the
Do
family.
you think he walks on set with a t-shirt with a red shield on it? You know? So yeah, I didn't know about the Rothschild connection. That's very interesting, isn't it? And yeah, like you say, these things keep popping out the
they do, don't they?
Know, the pages, don't you, when you start looking at them?
Yeah. Somebody who's commented on I'm terrible with names, I really am, but I really do appreciate the comments that people are putting on my channel on the recent video I did about the Matrix Resurrections. And I am going to go down the rabbit hole with that one, because on that initial review, it looked like I was just being softly with it, but I'm well aware of the, you know, the connections and the symbolism and all that kind of thing. And that's very much the case with a lot of these things, isn't it? You know, the esoteric symbolism is there. And we've had this conversation many times. You wonder what it is that they're trying to, is it limited hangout? Is it controlled? You know, is it, I can't remember how you worded it once, this idea of people that work expected and required to play their part, you know, portray and convey certain messages and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that does happen. So, but yeah, Grateful Dead as well. Any thoughts on that initially? I've got a bit I want to read out from my book, but
yeah, please do. Please refresh my memory, because I remember we talked about this a long time ago. But yeah, the whole tune is kind of darker, isn't it? The sort of intro tune, it's got a darker kind of, I don't know, you know, you had the original tune with the sort of played on a, I don't know, on a pizzicato, on a violin or a lute or something. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was played on. So they've got a hint of that, and then a sort of more sort of darker tone to it all, haven't they? And almost just random. It's not
It's nightmarish,
really,
isn't it? It's very
yeah,
much sort
yeah.
of
That's, I think, yeah, it's sort of like a graveyard type tune, which of course
absolutely.
fits with the name of the group, doesn't it? I guess. So
Oh, yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
but yeah, do refresh my memory as to what's
They
in your book.
did actually do some incidental music on the episodes as well, which I didn't know. I just thought they were involved with the actual theme tune and that was it. But I did note, I think it was mainly the first season, but they did do quite a bit of incidental music in the episodes as well. So yeah, so rather than me try to sort of grab bits all over the place, I'm just going to read out just about a page. It's less than a page out from my book, Science Fiction: The Hidden Global Agenda. So you'll have to take the context that this is in. We're talking at this point here. I'm talking about Courtney Love of all people. And Kurt Cobain,
yes, yeah.
But there is a reason why I brought this up. So
yeah,
it's been suggested that Courtney Love is involved with mind control programming, either programmed or as a handler. The same has been claimed of Kurt Cobain, presumably as a victim. Courtney Love's father was Hank Harrison, writer and ex-manager of CIA assets, the Grateful Dead. There is a direct line of association between the Grateful Dead and the CIA's drug-pushing Merry Pranksters and Operation Chaos. And I do have links for all of this in my books,
yes.
evidential links for all of this. So not so much this section here, but I just thought it was fascinating. The following is taken from Jim Keith's book, Mind Control, World Control. Aldous Huxley collaborator Keith Dittman provided author Ken Kesey with an unlimited supply of LSD, and it's from the small group that arose Kesey's guerrilla theatrical Merry Pranksters and the Grateful Dead, a rock band that still commands large cultic following after the demise of its leader. Keith also writes the first member of the Grateful Dead to take LSD, Robert Hunter, did so under the auspices of government-sponsored Stanford University drug study. An FBI internal memo from 1968 also mentioned the employment of Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead as an avenue to, quote, channel youth dissent and rebellion into more benign and non-threatening directions. It's obvious that their laid-back, non-political stance involved stance. The Grateful Dead have performed a vital service in distracting many persons into drugs, mysticism, rather than politics. And then there's one other little article that I'd got from Sierra Peterson, researcher of ritualistic abuse and mind control, author of the Watching the Watchers blog, claims that Hank Harrison was an associate of Lab 9 groupie and SRI asset Jack Sarfati. The following is from Miranda Kelly's 2012 article, MK Ultra Insider, Kurt Cobain was assassinated. One of the people Jack Sarfati, mentioned hooking me up with was Hank Harrison, Courtney Love's father, who has been accused of domestic violence by every single member of his family. Jack told me that Harrison is an expert in mind control. And Sarfati said that Harrison was secretly tied with the intelligence community, most likely the military. And one other little thing is Hank Harrison's 1980 edition of the book The Dead, a vague documentation of all things Grateful Dead, is dedicated to, amongst other things, the boys at the Bohemian Club. And I did find out that the Grateful Dead's Mickey Hart and Bob Weir are both documented Bohemian Club members and Bohemian Grove attendees. So make of that what you will. Some people say, you know, oh, Bohemian Club, yeah, what does that prove, you know? But we know that there's a lot of shady stuff goes on behind the scenes, a lot of connections and political shenanigans and all sorts of weird rituals and belief systems involved. So yeah. Any thoughts, Andrew, on that?
Yeah, I think one thing that came to mind was, I think, you know, people like such as you've described, we're not really going to know how deeply involved they are with these so-called agenda elements. But I think just them being associated with them and getting knowledge that there is another level of things, another layer where stuff is going on, usually not good and not necessarily legal by our normal, you know, everyday sort of system that we are forced to live by. You know, they have to keep quiet about such things, you know, and maybe having them have some level of awareness of it that helps them with this, you know, consciousness thing where there is a level of awareness which is built within the population, which then, but according to their belief system, allows them to you know, get away with it because they don't get challenged, you know, they don't get they don't get said, look, hang on, you can't do this, you know. And having somebody like, you know, a few members of the Grateful Dead at least having some awareness of this backstory, this higher level, or whatever you want, however you want to metaphor you want to give it, you know. And then that, of course, gets filtered through to elements of the Twilight Zone as well, and therefore out into a wider viewing sort of public. You know, is it all part of how this works? Well, I think we can probably conclude from the sort of research you've been doing that does form a cog in or a few cogs in the system of how this all hangs together for them, and how it allows them to, you know, extend their influence across all sectors and all of society and most cultures, you know.
Absolutely.
Apparently.
I think when you've got principally you've got it's always fascinated by the occult elements, the esoteric stuff, the mysticism, the ritual, all that kind of thing. And people talk about organizations that are secretive and that, you know, well, what difference does it make? But fundamentally, my argument is, well, if you've got nothing to hide, why do you need to be secret? You know, we've talked about this before, haven't we? If it's nothing to hide, why do you need to, you know?
And that's what they often say to us, isn't it? When they want to introduce all these security passes or whatever, and it's something like that, you know.
Absolutely. But,
you know, you could call it, I think, you know, I just thought of a phrase, I don't know whether it's original or whatever, but, you know, all this Grateful Dead thing that you've just described and other elements like that, you could consider it as a kind of cultural infiltration, like they're infiltrating into the culture at a kind of, sometimes at a conscious level and sometimes at a subconscious level, you know, and I think that is how I would describe what they do.
Well, I think it's still, and there's a lot of that going on now. Very much so. There's a lot that, you know, I've looked, and you have as well, no doubt. The involvement of these various alphabet letter agencies, as we call them, you know, particularly intelligence assets, involving themselves in pop culture and modern mythology and all that kind of thing. And you wonder, well, why? Well, what has that got to do with the work that they do, you know? But they do. It's documented. It's well documented. And a lot of that's going on now with the identity politics platforms that are being inserted into it. It's old hat. It's been around for a long time, and no doubt it will always be there to some degree while we've got pop culture and all that kind of thing. So it's a difficult one with these things. I've had people say to me in the past, why do you bother researching these things? Why do you bother watching these things? And more to the point, where we talk about actually getting something good out of something as well, because if it's all part of an agenda, there's really principally nothing good to get out of it then, because we're falling victim to whatever these messages are. But I think if, like, for example, we talked about that Grateful Dead thing, and if the interest in the these weird ritualistic mystical type things and all that, you know, whatever you take on that, be good or bad, my attitude to that is more, it's the intent rather than the practice. It's the intent behind it, you know. And the Twilight Zone has got a lot of mysticism in it. It's got a lot of these ideas of ritual and stuff like that. And we talk about secrets. I mean, one of the episodes we're going to talk about, Need to Know, is it's very much like that, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Chinese whispers, you know. So unless there's anything else you wanted to cover on that, I think I've pretty much covered my notes for that, just generic stuff about the Twilight Zone.
No, I think, you know,
you jump into the episodes.
Sure, absolutely.
Right, so our first episode is, they're all from season 1, these episodes. The first episode is To See the Invisible Man. Did you want to introduce our listeners, viewers, to the plot?
So it's one of these set in a sort of mildly dystopian future. You would imagine, maybe, you know, around about now, actually.
Yeah, that's why I thought this one would be a good one to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly sort of normal looking society. It's not a sort of science fiction-y type place particularly. The only thing I noticed that seems kind of odd in the storyline, and this story I think doesn't particularly fit well together, is that they have communal eating. So it's pretty much on the surface, it's a normal society like we have now. You know, people are going to work in an office. The office looks fairly normal, what you see of it, at least, or the outside it does, and they seem to have a normal working relationship. And the episode opens with this chap saying that he's been accused of coldness to his colleagues or his family, whatever, and that's not really properly defined.
No.
And then they sentence this. He's sentenced through a machine, through a
I thought that was interesting. The automated judge jury type thing rather than actual person.
It does appear automated.
It appears
but
to be,
we don't
we don't know.
We don't get to know whether it's a robot. It's a human voice, and he has human sort of captors who have put him into this chair and stuff. And they claim that they've evaluated testimony from various people and found him guilty of coldness.
Yeah.
So he's sentenced to a year's invisibility. But all that this means is that he has an indelible mark put on his forehead, which is like a giant, giant boil or something. Yeah, but it's funny. That's right. It's in the third eye, in the position of the third eye, and that's true. It's not something blatantly obvious on the front of his face, and this has certain unusual properties, like when he tries to cover it up with a hat, it burns through the hat.
Yeah, so that people can see that it's there.
So that people can see it. And then when everyone sees him, they'll initially react normally if they see him from behind. I think the first sequence is where somebody bumps into him and they apologize to him, but they don't see the mark on his forehead.
Yeah.
And then they sort of just go silent, and a drone comes up and sort of is, policing the reaction of this person to this guy who's been made invisible. And that's how the society runs. So the society is, this guy doesn't really have anything done to him other than this strange thing stuck to his head. He's not sanctioned in any other way. He still seems to have an income. He doesn't, he doesn't. And then he, it's like he goes and tries to commit petty crime. And I was wondering about how that would all work. Why didn't he just?
I thought that, yeah.
Why didn't he get charged with a crime? When he was invisible. But then of course they can't do that because they have to treat him as invisible. But then again, would you really just go in and do what he did if you knew you could get away with anything?
Yeah, I mean, we can come to that scene with the car, the thieves with the car in a moment as well when you finish.
Yeah.
Because that's a weird kind of take on criminal activity as well, isn't it? So yeah.
It was a little bit, yeah. I mean, I think the way I think that you can probably see that there were some rewrites went around on some of that to sort of choose things. But there is a scene, of course, where he gets befriended by a blind man and they strike up a conversation, and then and it's funny, they have this sort of giant canteen where everyone eats together. And he goes into this even as an invisible person. He helps himself to the food because they won't serve him because he's invisible. And then this blind man comes to sit next to him, and then
it's bizarre how it works, because there's also restaurants as well, isn't there, but people can, like these posh pit folk can go and book and all that. So it's very vague how it works. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I suppose what they were trying to do in the storyline was have a basically normal society, and then have a mechanism within that normal society to single somebody out as a wrongdoer. And therefore it's like an open prison sentence, as it were. He doesn't actually go to prison. And explore that concept. And then of course this whole thing only goes on for a year, doesn't it, for him? It's a year-long sentence, and he reckons it'll be no problem for him. So maybe you can discuss the car scene and what happens there.
I've got some notes, but obviously that was one of the ones. I've only really got about 3 pages of notes, but that was one that stuck out to me, was these people who basically break into a car to try and steal it, and then they realize that he's invisible, that what they call the invisible, the criminal element, as it were, in the story. So they try to run him over, and they do him some harm, don't they, if I remember?
That's right.
But nobody seems to sort of step in and stop them from doing any harm to him, and more to the point, no one seems to step in and stop him from these people from stealing the car as well. So the whole criminal justice system in this world is a bit sort of vague, but we've got these security drones floating around everywhere watching everything. So how it works is left a bit sort of vague. I think it's more the point of they're trying to tell them the message more than than the world building. The message is that, you know, this world where people are, you know, to be not incompassionate is a crime, you know, and your coldness, as they put it, like you say, and then to just sort of sentence them to public invisibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's the later part of the plot, of course, is that he meets a woman who is also invisible.
Yeah,
and he tries to talk to her, but she won't talk to him and walks off and ignores him. And you know, then she's obviously been made invisible quite recently, so she's still trying to sort of keep herself clean, so to speak, and stop a sort of reoffence.
Because we assume that the people that are invisible can't speak to other invisible people either. That also extends to them, even though they are. So that's another example of how it is a little bit vague how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely vague. And yeah, and then of course at the end of the story, he's been had his sentence, you know, finishes, and he gets the invisible mark taken off him. And then within a couple of hours or the next day or a couple of weeks, whenever time period is not specified, he meets this woman again, and she's still invisible and he's not. She says, "Oh, you got to speak to me. You got to speak to me. You know what it's like being invisible." And initially, he says he walks away the opposite direction without acknowledging her, and then decides that he will.
Yeah.
And oddly, as you say, he's showing compassion for this woman, and then he's charged with showing compassion for an invisible person. So
yeah, that's right.
The logic is quite strange, and then you assume that he is made invisible again. You know, we don't know, so it's left open to you know, question, really.
Yeah, I thought my thought on this, I don't know whether you agree with me or not on this one, but I think the message that they were trying to convey at the end was that because they initially set it out of his crime was coldness, that he didn't know how to sort of you know, empathize with people and things like that, that he'd learned that through his sentence. And even though it would technically be another crime again and it would give him another sentence to show compassion to her, but he'd learned his lesson from his crime. So how did I put it in my notes here? Because his crime was being cold, he has changed and talks to her, but this has the effect of creating another invisible sentence. Because she said to him, "Can't you take pity on me? How can you be so cold?" And that was his original sentence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, the narration comes over at the end of the episode and says he's going to go through all of this again, but he will wear his invisibility as a shield this time. Which I thought was quite an interesting little touch on that.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a case of slightly mixed messages, you know, but certainly the general theme of victimizing somebody for a certain type of behavior, rather than actually a physical crime or causing physical harm or damage, you know, physical harm to somebody or physical damage to somebody's property. You know, this idea of singling somebody out was, of course, I think why we've chosen to talk about it in a sentence based on just on their behavior and not anything else, really.
I wanted to talk about it. It's a difficult one to talk about, especially with censorship being the way it is on the internet now at the moment. You know, you think that you're okay to talk about certain things, and they keep moving the goalposts constantly. So but you know, I try not to use certain words and things like that. But one of the things that I thought was fascinating about this was how, although you'd got the drones, you'd got the sentences, you've got the police and that, but the sentence is largely, the punishment is largely being carried out by the people, because they are the ones that are ignoring these invisible people. And there's what I thought was fascinating, and this chimes with now as well. I you know, we can assume that certainly you and I have heard stories, and it's going this way now anyway. But this idea of him, when he's run over by the car, he's trying to get help from the hospital, and they won't give him any medical treatment because of his invisible status. You know, she sees the nurse, whoever it is, the administrator of the hospital, sees this mark on his head, just shuts him down, you know, and
switches off the call. He's
left there to be in pain and we know that it didn't kill him, but you know, yeah, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? If you are one of these people in society who's placed in ostracized or whatever, whether it be and these people are doing it to him, you know, they know, they've been told, well, this is the way the world works, this is the law, right. This is what you've got to do, but now it's left to you to police it yourself, kind of thing.
That's it.
We get a security drone coming here and there occasionally just to remind people, don't do this, you know, that. But then it goes back to the emphasis is put back on again on society. That is very much the world we are living in at the moment.
It is very much so. And I mean, those drones, they don't actually you don't see them in the storyline administering any type of punishment. No, it's purely an observational
there.
And record.
I think there's a bit of a voice coming out of them occasionally saying,
they have a voice, and presumably we presume in the storyline that they're recording things in some way, and that's it, isn't it? As you say, the rest of the system is done by people complying with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mass compliance, which of course is exactly what's happening now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're creating in this scenario a two-tiered society. You know, where people are completely pushed out and ostracized is the good word. But I did think recently. Again, I'm gonna use different words for certain words within this one, but this came across my radar fairly recently that I've noticed that. There's a video that's going around of Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada at the moment. People saying that it's recent, but it's actually from September 2001 to September 2021. Sorry, bit of a Freudian slip there. On a French news show, and he was saying, yes, we will get through this pandemic by needlecraft. I'll use that term instead. And yes, we will all know some people that have certain ideas about it, but we will continue to convince them there are some people that are fiercely against needlecraft. And then the interviewer says they are extremists, and he replies, they do not believe in science. They are often misogynist, often racists. That's another word that YouTube doesn't like. As well, a small group that occupies a loud space, and there are decisions that need to be made as a leader, as a country. Do we tolerate these people? So you can see it there, can't you? In modern terms, it's very much that idea of punishing people for not going along with a certain narrative or whatever. I forget her name. The Prime Minister of New Zealand is another one who recently talked about, openly admitted, yes, we will be creating a two-tiered society. We will. That's just the nature of the way it's going to be. And if you don't like it, well, you know, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen these leaders come out with all this claptrap, and it's quite disturbing. And you have to wonder, have do they watch, you know, Twilight Zone or these other things? Do they go and see these films, you know, like Hunger Games or whatever? And what do they think of them? You know,
V for Vendetta is another one.
You know,
I recently rewatched some of Russell T Davies's stuff, Years and Years, which is very portentous, you know. The fourth season of Miracle Day, Torchwood Miracle Day as well. With that, I mean, that's another one that's.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's definitely worth checking out. I mean, that's another one that really, even in the Twilight Zone itself. I think it was last year I did a video with Dan where we did quite go down the rabbit hole a fair bit actually with some original Twilight Zone episodes, and we looked at the obsolete man episode, you know, the librarian that wants to, you know, that one very well. Yeah, that's another episode that's very much like that.
Very similar.
Totalitarian society, dictatorial society, and it's a fascinating way to observe these things. And I think I've talked about how things are done today, and it's disingenuous and it's bash you over the head and it's not done. But I tend to think that the best kind of science fiction is like morality plays. People say this about Star Trek, The Outer Limits, the original Twilight Zone, and I think this continued this in the 1980s with the Twilight Zone, very much so. The morality tale here, aside from all what we've talked about, is this idea of should you be cold and dispassionate? Should you, you know, what can you do to improve that? You know, if you are that sort of person, they very much show you the because they have the child in the restaurant, and the child, the innocence, you know, he's talking to him. It doesn't seem to but the child must clearly know about the system, because there's a woman who kind of whispers in his ear and says, and then he stops talking to him then. So it's that innocence of the child, that doesn't need to bother. Like you said, the old chap, the blind man as well, he talks to him. There's a very unsettling scene where he goes into a spa and there's all these women that are sort of sitting in a hot tub naked.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's not very... And they clearly are traumatized by the fact that there's this man there that's sort of like ogling over them and that. But very quickly he realizes, what am I doing here? Well, I know I'm going through this sentence and all the rest of it and having this horrible time, but I really shouldn't be doing this. And I think that's the turning point in the story, isn't it? So shall we look at our second episode then? This one's Button. Fascinating story. I'll let you lead the way on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's a fairly straightforward kind of plot idea, isn't it? Where, we have these two, this couple who are a man and woman, wife and husband, presumably.
Very bad acting, though, by the way. I must just say the acting is atrocious in it. It's really hammy and over the top. But the story
is a little bit, isn't it? But it does kind of remind you of an episode of the Slobs, doesn't it?
Yeah. When it's a slob, very much so. Yeah. That's one very much for UK
you get viewers. You get it.
Yeah.
I am smoking a fag.
And she's got one on the go.
Yeah, she's a chain smoker, isn't she?
Yeah.
And yeah. Have you fixed the car, Wayne? No, I have not. It's kind of a bit like that. I mean, the guy is a bit more sympathetic, really.
Yeah, he's a bit more, but yeah.
He's not quite your Wayne slob, but there's a bit of that, and I think I think they need those sorts of characters to kind of make the plot work a little bit better, perhaps. In other words, it's oriented around them being paid a lot of money, isn't it? So the idea, of course, is that they wake up one morning and the guy goes out of they live in, it looks like a motel room, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think they must have hired a motel to film this or something. And so they've got a broken car. They're very poor. They've no money. He works in some low-paid job, presumably. He's trying to fix the car so that the lady can get to the supermarket to get the shopping when she
get a fags.
Get a fags.
We need more fags.
Yeah. And so she it's funny because she wheels the shopping trolley right into the apartment.
Yeah, she does, doesn't she? Yeah.
It make me grin, that one. And so that's sort of a bit of the first few minutes of setting up that sort of scenario, really. And then the next thing is that they get a package delivered, a mysterious cardboard box wrapped in brown paper with string around it. He opened it up. The man gives it to the woman. The woman opens it, and inside is a, sort of little wooden cake, sort of like a pyramid type shape instead of having the apex of the pyramid, you have a little dome, which is, and then it has a button inside it. And then the next afternoon or the next morning, there's a knock at the door and a man comes in and says, look, did you find the button unit? And she says yes. And well, here's the key for it, and if you open up this button unit and you press the button, somebody you do not know will die and you will receive $200,000 in cash. And that's the basics. So nothing else is explained. They don't know who will die. They don't know how they will die. They don't know when. They assume that they will get paid this money. I think that, and then the guy leaves. And so they have a conversation about it. I think the guy goes off to work and they talk about it when he gets back after his work. And he, of course, is playing the role of somebody who cares. He says, look, if this is true, we don't want to be pressing this button. We don't want somebody just to die just because we press a button. It doesn't really matter what sum of money we get paid, And oddly, you'd think, well, this is obviously some type of marketing scam. They don't discuss.
They do mention that, don't they? They said, "Is this a marketing scam? Is this some sort of..." Yeah.
But they don't have an argument much about that. They ask the question, but then maybe it's just again a shortness of time to do all the things that needed to be done in the script. But so they have a bit of an argument about she's sort of more inclined to say, well, I'm going to press it, if we don't know them, it doesn't matter, so I'm just going to press it. But she's not totally sold on the idea. She still has some kind of conscience about it, about the idea of it. I mean, she might, for all they know, it could be a prank, a joke of some kind. But they think the way it's been delivered and what the guy says, they think, no, this is probably not a joke. This is probably something weird that we don't fully understand that's going on. But still, we that amount of money,
they need it.
They need
that's
it,
their justification for it anyway. Yeah,
that's where justification, exactly. So, do they press it? Don't they press it? Would you? The moral question is
that's
presented.
the big question, isn't it? Yeah, that's the question of it. And
would you do something which would be very beneficial for you, but
potentially kill
terrible for somebody else?
Yeah.
But you'd never get to know about that.
That's right.
That's the way it's presented in the story. And so, spoilers and everything, but they after this discussion, she decides to unlock the case and open the flap and press the button.
Yeah.
And nothing happens. They've all previously looked inside it, and it's an empty box.
There's nothing in it, is there? No.
There's nothing in it. There's no radio transmitter. There's no. It says, there's no computer in it. There's no circuitry. Nothing. It's just a spring and a
wooden box with a
red button with a gold cap.
Yeah. Dome on it.
So there's, again, they don't really just, this is clearly just some nonsense, and we never really get to know if they truly know whether the button has been pressed by some type of hidden sensor of some kind. That's implied when the guy comes back the next day and he says, can I have it back, please? And did you press it? And they say yes. And he comes with a briefcase of money and he gives them the money. And opens it, and it's I can wait, while you count it if you want. And and they don't. That's not shown in the episode. And then he just says, well, we'll take the button unit away, we'll reprogram it, and here's the money, you could spend it, and we're going to give this button to somebody else, and then somebody they know will die,
Don't know, sorry. I think, is that right?
If they press it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's sort of said in a sort of, not exactly a threatening way, but I think that what you're meant to think, or at least what I thought when watching it,
the previous user of the button is the person or one of the people that I thought that.
Does that mean? And the woman is clearly thinking that as something along those lines, that will the next person kill us?
Yeah, and so on and so on and so on.
They press the button. And,
yeah.
So is this just a way of getting rid of people and recycling the 200,000?
Yeah, it just comes and collects the money afterwards,
or in some way. But of course, we don't know. We never get to. Yeah, we don't get to see if that's the case. So really, it's just like a psychological, not even a thriller, is it? You wouldn't call it a psychological thriller, but it's a psychological teaser, perhaps, and getting you to think about.
But somebody did try to address that in a film, which I'll come to in a minute. We can talk first about the episode, because this story was remade as a film by Richard Kelly in 2009, I think it was. It might be wrong on the date on that one, called The Box, but we'll come to that in a minute. Yeah, that's fascinating. Some stories behind that. So yeah.
But I think the theme for me is just you've got a very simple act. And how much are you as a person going to consider the possible consequences of that action? And I think we can all, we don't know the consequences of our actions, when we buy something, or we eat something, or we use something that's taken materials and stuff to, if we buy some type of, electrical appliance, what's gone into making that,
It's certainly the big question of the modern age, isn't it? Well, everything that with mass consumer society, what?
So what's that? What events do our actions trigger that we don't ever get to know about? That's, I suppose, the theme of this episode. People clearly are considering the consequences of their actions.
They are, absolutely.
But what we're thinking of is they're being, pummeled with a false scenario, which implies that there are certain consequences of their actions or non-actions, actions or inactions, and they're basing their behavior on that false scenario. So I think they are considering the consequences of their actions, but not in a way which is truthful or honest, because they've been given so much false information.
Brings us back to what we were talking about current time again.
Exactly.
There are other examples as well, many examples, but it's relevant to today. Absolutely. Again, these episodes very much are.
Absolutely.
It's an important point you bring up there, that the trap sometimes is thinking that you know what it is that the consequences are, what you're told the consequences are, that there are no consequences, or there are consequences, but they're not the consequences that exist in the real world, So
and going back to that woman's point of view, where she decided to suppress it, then she might have pressed it for different reasons. One is that she doesn't care about the consequences, or she doesn't believe the consequences that will be what the man said they would be, because she's not actually given any evidence. She's not given a time, a date, a place. What will happen to these other people? Will they be house burnt down? Will they have a bomb dropped on the house? She's not given any of that information, so she has to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, as I call it. It's like
exactly.
If you live it again, that's today. That's something that's happening now, where if you fill in the gaps, thinking these are what the consequences are going to be. I think that if we other people in society have said, no, I do actually know as much as I can know what the consequences really are going to be. So I'm not going to make that choice. But then, of course, people police it. It's because it all circles back to the same thing, doesn't it?
And the guy plays that role. The guy kind of polices that a bit more, and he has more of a conscience about it. But he doesn't have any more information than she. He doesn't have any more information than she does.
That's right. Yeah, he picks this very sort of ephemeral sort of idea out of thin air. Because she says, what happens if I don't know why specifically she chooses this type of culture, but she says a Chinese peasant or something like that. Who would care if that, or somebody who's dying of cancer, if they died, and then he turns around and says, what if it was a newborn baby? I mean, I tend to think all life is precious. So, the distinction shouldn't be, there shouldn't be any distinction. If you know that you're
pro-life,
if you know that your consequences are going to kill somebody, don't do it. That's me. I do see those things in very much black and white terms, but
sure. But that's when you know what the situation is clear.
When I know exactly.
And of course we see that argument that they had in that story being played out. Oh, you're not wearing a mask, so you're going to kill somebody.
Exactly.
So we're seeing that scenario in the button played out. Over the last couple of years, millions of times over, sort of thing.
Every day we see it every day.
So that I think is why we chose these stories, and picking out these themes, because this again is where science fiction is useful, in that it allows the brain to explore these these scenarios.
You slipped there, you Freudian slip.
I did Freudian slip there. It allows us to explore these scenarios in a different context, and we may end up with an opposite kind of position to the one that we'd have in the real world, even though essentially we're looking at the same situation. One just has happened in a fictional world, or not happened in a fictional world, and the other one we think is in the real world.
That's right.
That's why we're doing all this,
and that's why long may it continue. I worry. I'm a fierce advocate for not every science fiction, but certainly the science fiction that's good, thoughtful, well written science fiction that has a good message to it, not just any old trope, And I'm always telling people, buy your physical media, folks. Get these things on DVD, because I can envision, and people might say I'm being alarmist, but I can envision a Fahrenheit 451 type of world where these things are just being got rid of, you know, not physically being burnt in the streets, but surreptitiously they're being disappeared, you know, so that you can't access them anymore, and you won't know these stories anymore, and those messages will be lost forever.
Potentially,
yeah. I mean, these things always get retold in different ways, but these stories are powerful, you know, in the format that they are, you know, so why shouldn't they continue, you know? But you saying about where these stories take us, I wanted to talk about that this episode for the very reason that you've brought up, you know, because of how it's relevant to today, this idea of making choices and consequences, that kind of thing. But then I looked into the remake. And is there anything else you wanted to say about the episode? Because I'm pretty sure you haven't seen this. I don't know. You haven't seen this, right? So,
nope.
This is a strange. This is a real oddity. Just bear with me 1 second. So, it was 2009 that this film came out. Generally, the film follows the same pattern as the episode. They've expanded it vastly to fit a sort of hour and a half, 2 hour format for a film, and it introduces this idea. I think the first 45 minutes or so of the film is that the couple have got the I think it's Cameron Diaz and James Marsden, I think, got this box, and Frank Langella plays the Mr. Stewart character. He's got like a deformed side of his face in it. Very creepy how it's done. And they're trying to make this decision because they've got a son who's got some sort of disability, and they want to be able to get him sort of in good state of health and that. So the money is very much needed. And then it goes into the crazy realms. It goes into extraterrestrials and dimensional portals and teleportation and stuff that's right up our street, actually, you know, but in a very sort of bizarre way how it's done. I think it's a film that needs to be paid attention to. And one of the reasons why I think it needs to pay attention to is because as oftentimes I come across these things on DVD commentaries and things like that. You hear people, the filmmakers, talking about stuff, and you think, why is it that people don't talk about this more often? Why don't people recognize that this has got a relevance to the stories of this person? So Richard Kelly, director writer of Donnie Darko, that's another film that's got allusions to 9/11 and the Mandela effect and time travel and all kinds of crazy stuff. Southland Tales, another one. Then he does The Box, and his film career pretty much collapses after that. I wonder if that's telling us something, because he's not really made another film since then. 12, 13 years have gone by. He's tried to get other films off the ground, hasn't happened. So, you know, I'm very much of the belief that when somebody gets cancelled in Hollywood, there's a reason why they get cancelled.
You
know, and it's people have said it's because his films bombed. Donnie Darko was an underground, you know, a cult following. He became made a lot of money on its re-release and things like that. But then he got a higher budget for his films. He does Southland Tales, which bombs. He does The Box, which bombs. I think The Box only made something like $7 million more dollars than $7 million more dollars than it cost to make in total profits or something like that. It really did just broke even. So that's not even considering publicity or anything like that, you know, advertising the film. So look, so going back to what I was saying, because I'm rambling a little bit, going off track here, but so on the commentary, I found out that Richard Kelly, his dad worked at NASA during the 1970s. So his dad was Lane Kelly, and he worked on the Mars Viking probe missions. He specifically worked on the cameras, and specifically the ones, as we know, that created the perspective of there being red sky, the specifics of that, the color palette, I think you've put a video up on that, and you've put it in your books as well. So that perception of Mars being colored a certain way, he was one of the guys that worked on that happening that way. So so a big figure in terms of
isn't it?
so Lane Kelly was his name. He was one of the guys that worked on it. he admitted in the commentary that the two main characters in the box were based extensively on his mom and dad. The box was filmed partly at NASA and Langley, with full permission and cooperation from NASA and the US Air Force at Langley. And Gentry Lee, a stalwart of NASA and JPL, also worked in a key position on the Viking program. He's a close friend of Richard Kelly. And Gentry Lee crops up a lot in relation to Star Trek and the NASA connection as well. So I thought that was interesting. But he was a production advisor and consultant on the box. And he also appeared as one of Arthur's work colleagues at NASA in the film. So you're going to love this one now, Andrew. Get ready for this one. Right. So there's this bizarre section of the commentary where it's prompted by an image that appears on the TV screen immediately after the two central characters depart the wedding rehearsal dinner. The TV shows a shot of a ship sailing past the WTC Twin Towers as part of the United States bicentennial celebrations, the film set in 1976, by the way. And in the commentary, at about 50 minutes into the commentary, make of this what I mean, I thought he's been cryptic here with this one. So I'm going to word it exactly as he says. You might find a correlation between the WTC towers there on our bicentennial footage. I'll let you take what you will from that image in terms of manipulation and, in quote, the employees and perhaps what is to come. This test and this experiment might last for many, many, many years in many, many, many different incarnations.
Wow.
So the illusion, I thought, at least, take it as you will, is that the experiments that he was talking about and the tests, they are in the plot of the film, but as he's talking about it, it sounds like he's talking about something external to the film as well. So in the plot of the film, these experiments do go on for decades, and there is this quasi-narrative in the film connecting what happened in New York. So the illusion is that September the 11th is something to do, in the future, will have something to do with the ongoing plot of this film if we ever got to that point in the timeline. But it's interesting that there does seem to be tangential evidence connecting parties like NASA, JPL, to the cover-up of 9/11, what really happened on 9/11. You got the NIST report and all that, the technologies to destroy that. That all goes back to Dr. Judy Wood, you know, where did the towers go? And the books and research you've done as well, you know. So, and there does seem to be very much this idea of advanced technology, energy technology in the film as well. So, any thoughts on that then? I mean,
I've
landed all of this on you without you watching the film, so maybe I should have got you to watch the film first. But
yeah, that's certainly a very interesting line of sort of statement there, and it does sound like he has inside knowledge of the bigger picture. You know,
I think so,
because I think that there's certain comments there which I think you'd be hard pressed to make if you didn't have some kind of clue as to the larger picture. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting. I haven't seen that film, and that is very interesting.
Yeah, it's been off my radar for a while, and because of this I rewatched it and I thought,
very interesting. Yeah.
So I will try and get you a copy of that, and you can watch it.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll probably be able to find it somewhere. But yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely worth watching. It's a strange film, but when you get listening to those commentaries and all the other little extras on it as well, and you see all this picture that's being painted with NASA and JPL and advanced technologies and all this kind of thing, and you're thinking, wow, you know, this is, yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to say about the box, really, before we go on to our final episode?
No, I think I've covered what I'd made notes on and stuff. So we'll move on.
Apologies to the viewers there, because I said the box. I meant to say button then. So yeah, it's because we were talking about the box, obviously. Yeah. So our final episode is Need to Know. Do you want to lead the way with this one then?
Yeah. So this is initially, you think it might be about some type of contagious disease, because that's a sort of plot line.
That's where we are with these things, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in a sort of rural community somewhere in the US. I forget where it says it is. I think it does say which state it's in. I don't know if you remember, but
I can't remember. It's small town America type thing, isn't it?
Small town America, you know, with they appear to have their own radio station and their own hospital and stuff, so it's not that small.
No.
But so starts off, you know, on a farm somewhere, and two guys chatting, and one guy says, "Oh, let me tell you something," whispers in his ear.
Yeah.
And the other guy then cries out. First he starts laughing, and then it looks like he's about to fall over. You don't actually see him fall over. It then switches to another shot. And it's not fully clear what's happened to this guy, but you later learn within 2 or 3 minutes that he's gone mad, you know. So he's been with this other guy, and then he's gone mad, and then there's some woman that starts to investigate this, because another person goes mad, and it's her father. So she then you know, brings in an external investigator who's probably a federal employee, and he comes with some type of portable lab kit, but you don't really get to see what that is.
No.
We assume it's some type of, maybe a microscope or something for just testing biological samples or something. And so he gets in on the act, and he goes to see some people. They start an investigation. He goes to see the woman's father, who has apparently gone completely potty.
Yeah.
And he's locked up in a hospital room, and it's quite an odd scene, that, because the wall has got smears of blood across it, and no furniture.
Yeah.
And you're not really, you know, it's just a bit of a gruesome looking scene, isn't it? It looks slightly out of place, actually, because there isn't any other gore in the episode. There's no. It's not one of these slasher episodes.
To have any injuries to him?
He doesn't, does he? That I can remember. He doesn't seem to be injured himself.
Unless he's attacked somebody else or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the implication. I suppose there is another scene where they go and visit.
Oh, the little old lady with the cake and the knife.
That's right. That's a bit scary, isn't it? That was a little bit scary, that, because she's just cutting them a nice piece of cake with their tea, and then she attacks him with the knife. It doesn't do that, though, does it? But
no.
It is a bit touch of that. And she's a good actress, whoever did that.
Yeah.
Almost little old lady who's a bit batty, and then straight in there with the knife, you know. So what's that about, kind of thing. So they, of course, realize that this madness is spreading, and they decide they debate whether it's some type of virus or a contagious illness, and they get a lead that somebody else is the source of this viral infection, or what they think might be a viral infection. So the government guy, he goes out and drives a few miles to see this guy who's making sculptures in his house, and he then, you know, he starts talking to him. He seems fairly sane, doesn't he? He doesn't seem as crazy as other people are.
Not as much as the others, no.
And we've previously seen one of the doctors from the hospital a few minutes later, a few hours later, is then up on the roof of the hospital singing and shouting, and you know, and, I forget what he's singing, some type of song. We see him being marched off.
Is it Yellow Rose of Texas or something like that?
Is it something like that?
I think it was Yellow Rose of Texas, yeah.
Was it? Yeah. And we see him being marched off down the corridor by two guards, and he's, you know, just singing still and looking a bit doolally, you know. And they're all looking on a bit bemused, saying, "Oh, who's going to be next?" You know. And so they basically go and see this. He goes to see the guy in the house, and he's a sculptor, and he's sculpting things. And he says, "So, you know, what do you know about what's going on?" He says, "Oh, I'm into Eastern religions. You know, I studied Eastern religions, and I learned the secret of life and what we're here for, and what the universe is about." And you know, and he starts to talk to the other guy, and sort of goes right up to his ear as if he's going to whisper something in his ear. And the guy then twigs that you know, this is what it is. This is the problem. That it's a message being passed on that's causing people to go mad. You know? And then, of course, by this time, whoever's got this message, whatever it is, we, of course, don't find out what it is.
No.
Has said that they're going to do a slot on the local radio station and broadcast this message to all and sundry. And the guy who's the government guy who's worked out what it is, that this is some type of deadly message, he then tries to race to the radio station and stop this from being broadcast. But
yeah, because he's going to go on the radio and tell everybody, isn't he? Live on air.
That's right. But he, in the end, well, I don't know if he was racing to the radio station, but then he races back to this woman who he's, developed
his original companion, the woman,
involvement with. And she's of course got the radio station on the table, got the radio on the table, the radio station playing. Just as he walks in, just as he's about to blurt this thing out, he smashes the radio off the table, says, "Don't listen to it, don't listen to it." But then apparently she's got other people in the house, and they've been told whatever it is, and they've gone mad, Yeah,
and they've told her.
And they've told her, and she then tells him, and the final shot of the episode is him turning to the camera with a sort of wide-eyed look,
breaking the fourth wall, screaming.
Breaking the fourth wall, and that's the end. And the narrator then basically sort of, points out that maybe some knowledge, is too hot for people to handle. And
which I thought was a very good reason for us talking about this one.
It is, yes, because you look at it and you think, oh yeah, it's just like a spin on a viral infection story, which at one level it is that, how people can be infected with something and then become a danger to others, or so that's the conventional view of things, so you get this idea that this might be some type of mind virus, and people are going mad and they just become completely, incoherent and literally doolally is what we call it. And they do, that's how it's portrayed in the episode.
And I thought again, variations on a theme. We'll be careful how we say it here, but again, it's like now there has been an element more and more this has become a mind virus. What's going on as in the term you use it, but
so people's behavior in the episode is completely altered to the point where they can't function as they could before. And I think there's two ways you can look at this, actually diametrically opposed, really.
Yes.
In terms of what's been happening. And of course what you and I have been involved in that, the way what I thought about at the end when they finally sort of explained what their take on in the episode was of it, is that if we take it that this guy who'd been to the Far East and learned the secrets of transcendentalism, whatever it was, and learned the secret of life, I mean, we've already heard about that. And there's been, books written about it, and people have written stories about, made films about it, but they haven't been portrayed as going completely doolally. And actually, in fact, the old woman is turned into a murderer, isn't she? We've never had that sort of situation. But it is like when you learn about what we've learned, you do start to function differently. I mean, you still tend to you still normally go and get your shopping at the supermarket and stuff like that. Of course,
but
still function.
You can still interact with people and
still interact with people, but it does affect you very deeply, and clearly we know that some people are not ready to find out and understand what we've found out and understood, and certain things we've come to know as being true. Some people can't deal with that, so there's that aspect of it. Almost like, so in other words, agreeing with the episode, if they did have this, you and I we can say we have a need to know about certain things. We have a need to know what happened on 9/11. We have a need to know what's behind everything that's going on right now. We've devoted a significant proportion of our free time to exploring those things and getting a handle on what's actually the likelihood of But for other people, that can literally, they can't handle it. They can't do it. So that's why this episode, is relevant, and the concept is relevant.
And the reaction as well, because that reaction, how a lot of people
on the other end of it as well, particularly now, you and I would probably agree that a madness has swept the world, and this has been spread.
Yes.
Not by a biological.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hesitant to bring it up here. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know what your thoughts are on this book. I do have a lot of questions myself, but I got hold of this recently. It's A State of Fear by Laura Dodsworth. And I have a lot of questions.
I haven't read it, but
I have a lot of questions about Laura Dodsworth. There's a section in the book where she goes into this realm of specifically two people that she talks about, saying, if you go too far into the thinking of what's going on behind all of this, then you're a conspiracy theorist. That's the term she uses. And therefore, if you are, then you're a bit off the reservation kind of thing. And we need to stick to certain things. And I didn't appreciate that in the book at all. But I will credit where credit's due. There's a lot of evidential information that can be verified in this book about Spy B, the 770 Brigade, psychological warfare, all the, everything that steered this, everything that steered perception management of this. It's very much worth checking out all of that in it.
Right.
So I will give it credit where credit's due for that, because we do need to document these things. We do need to document, the psychological state of play, psychological warfare, manipulation, psychological operations, all that kind of thing. So if you have, therefore, a reaction to something that is utter panic, fear, craziness, but the message has been steered or created by somebody else, then the reaction is also false.
Yes.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's
yeah. It's kind of what I said in relation to the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
So this particular episode is again a similar concept in that affecting people's behavior in major ways.
Yeah.
But they don't, in this episode, they don't explore, you don't get to really learn why. You don't get to learn the details of what this guy actually said, that he learned in the Far East. That's never explained.
Yeah.
He just basically says it's to do with knowing our true purpose and, what life and the universe really is.
I did jot that down because I wanted to be, because it's the only thing that's specific, really. And even that is a bit vague. But he said,
yes,
man's purpose, destiny, life after death, God, the devil, existence, everything. And it is so simple. It's all very simple. It was supposed to be a secret. I have decided it's time to share this wonderful secret with all my neighbors. And obviously that goes on to the radio thing. But that's about as close to it. Oh, and obviously the reference to him studying Eastern
mysticism, I think.
Mysticism. Yeah.
I can't remember the exact word.
The Orient. I went to study in the Orient. I was going to write a book. I don't recall exactly, but then I found out, and it really didn't matter anyway, the meaning of everything. Yeah. So
he's found out the meaning of everything, but apparently he can deliver that to somebody in the storyline in one sentence, which takes.
Do you know what he did? He went 42.
Yeah.
Somebody's here. They all screamed. That's why he could do it so quickly.
Yeah, and then they started the quest to build the ultimate, computer to determine what the question was.
Sorry, go on. I derailed that one.
Yeah, but it is actually almost like that, isn't it? You're almost, if you're going to parody it, you think that he did say 42 in somebody's ear, because clearly the start of the episode, it doesn't take him very long to say what was said. No,
that's right.
You're literally saying 2-3 seconds sort of is the time scale, but this idea, I suppose, of a madness being spread through a message, that side of it is what's happened here now. And we, again, people make assumptions about what that message is, but I suppose in this episode, it seems to be more than that, because it's somebody wouldn't go mad just from saying 5 words to them. It's like, it's almost like, I suppose in the episode you are it is suggested there is some type of magic involved, or
I
something,
think,
you know,
yeah,
a curse,
yeah.
some type of
With the
demonic
Eastern
curse.
mysticism type element
Yeah,
on it, yeah.
you know, that's never openly stated, but
No,
the
it's
way
not.
that this
Sorry,
extreme
go on.
reaction is, so the way that this reaction is so extreme and profound, you would, in the context of what we think about, you'd probably assume that it was a form of black magic or something like that.
Because if it was a huge amount of data, it very much was like what we talked about in the Star Trek Voyager video we did with 7 of 9, having the download of all the information, huge amounts of information, and not being able to process it and all that kind of thing initially. So you could understand then if it was that, but how can you convey that in a story like this, in a small town, on a spaceship in the future? It's probably, you could do that, but this little town where people just whisper in somebody's ear, it's not so easy to. So I took that, like you say, as that there's more sort of an incantation, some sort to it, a mystical element to it. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an allegory for what we've seen going on right now. We can make that argument, even if it seems to be rather inappropriate. But yeah, the behavior of all these people in the story is significantly altered by some information they're apparently given.
And it's difficult to figure out if how consistent is there a uniform behavior, because like we say, the old lady's cutting the cake and she seems, I know she's a bit, you know, weird and all that, but and then all of a sudden she tries to stab them, and that, but the other chap's just singing on top of the roof. He's not trying to kill anybody at that point in time. I think the woman's dad at the beginning, she tried to attack him, didn't he? Tried to attack him. The chap who got the message in the first place, you know, in the Orient, he doesn't seem to want to attack him, although he does it afterwards, but that's more because he's trying to stop him from going and preventing him from going to the radio station. Or that. So there seems to be some sort of inconsistency to how people have reacted to it. There was something I wanted to bring up here. I don't really know how to sort of articulate this, but many moons ago, I had a conversation with somebody who was very much sort of an existential atheist, and I'm not a religious person. I'm more of a spiritual person, you know. I do have my beliefs, but they're not based around any kind of organized religion or anything like that. But this person very much opted out of the idea that everything, you know, there's no point to everything. Everything's all just random. You live your life, you're dead, you're gone, that's it. And he said that he believed, and he had no evidence of this, but he said, I just had this belief that all religions and belief systems were created to hide the fact that there is nothing, because if people didn't have anything to believe in, they would go insane. And that came back to me when I watched this episode. Not that I believe that is what is the case. I don't believe that to be the case with existence and reality and what is beyond at all. But it just came back to me. I don't know what you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, you know, you think about the power of beliefs, and clearly in the story of the episode, whatever it is that's spoken to these people, you know, if we say it's not like a magic curse or a magic whatever, then you know, is it just a belief being passed on? And if it is, then whatever is said to them, they instantly believe it, and it instantly affects them. So you know, that does suggest that the belief has a very, you know, strong power on people, and maybe that ties in with what this person says, that, you know, the belief creates a person's reality. And of course, or I'm paraphrasing what they said, that's one way of putting it. They didn't say that, but, and I think there's a lot to be said about that, you know, that the people, once people believe things, they do create a reality, and go along with that, you know, based on the belief, which they don't actually know whether that belief is valid or not. They haven't proved it. You know, they haven't established it with basic observation necessarily. They just assume that, you know, and maybe that's what you know, the person meant, and I would.
There is also something to this idea of mind over matter and things like that as well. You know, the power of consciousness and that, and
Absolutely.
Reshaping your realities and that as you need to. So,
So yeah.
So is there anything else we want to cover? I think we've pretty much got there, haven't we? With that,
I think so. Really, yeah. I mean, that last episode, you know, is probably more straightforward even than the others. I think it's just this idea of knowledge being passed on and people reacting to it, as you said, you know, slightly differently, but nevertheless in a generally negative way.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting how they all kind of tie in together, though, don't they? They
yes.
Maybe it's because we're also looking at it through the lens of what's going on in the world now, you know. So it appeals to us, but yeah. But just contextually, there seems to be a lot of overlapping themes here. Another episode I talked about, which we didn't talk about, was Wordplay. I mentioned it, and I noticed, I thought, is this going to be redundant? Because that kind of covered all of the things in these episodes in that as well. So yeah,
I think, well, I mean, I did watch that, and we haven't talked about it much, but we can mention it. And I think what that was an extreme version of was the redefinition of language. You know, language was redefined initially. That's quite minor, and within a few minutes it became major, to the point where the guy could no longer communicate.
Exactly.
And I think again that has a different set of parallels with what we're talking about, because we've seen right now how they've redefined certain linguistic concepts,
and we're having to do that in terms of talking online as well, because we're having to redefine, reword things because the censorship as well, and because of which is crazy, you know.
But we've seen with this how language has been you know, mangled, really, I suppose you might say, to affect the way that people perceive things. They've clearly, you know, I mean, I was watching a thing today where this guy was making videos about fixing radios, but he's clued into, it sounds like he's clued into things that are going on, and he was talking about somebody talked about breakthrough cases of the so-called illness, and this was allegedly where the treatment had not worked. You know, they haven't said, oh, the treatment hasn't worked. You know, they described it as a breakthrough case. You know? So again, this is a redefinition of language. In another context, it would just said, well, this has clearly been a failure, you know, so we need to have a different approach. That's not being said. So, and in that Twilight Zone episode, the wordplay that is done in an extreme form, and I think the guy ends up in a situation like you and I, where we just feel we can't communicate with people anymore. It becomes impossible to communicate the really important things, because their language has been so affected and slanted to be so different from the language that we are speaking, both in the actual words used and and we might be using the same words, but the concepts that we are trying to convey are almost diametrically opposed. So that whole episode is quite interesting in the way that it portrays the use of language. You know, but it is kind of you know, you can see what's going to happen there after that first couple of minutes. You kind of know what's going to happen. So anyway, but it's worth a watch if you've got access to it.
Absolutely, for people out there, definitely. There's quite a few episodes like that. It's a fascinating little show, the 1980s Twilight Zone. It really is. It's worth taking the time to watch. There's a lot of them available. A lot of them available to watch on YouTube. They've been around, floating around on YouTube for a long time. They haven't been removed, so they're worth checking out. Some great episodes. I mean, Examination Day is another good one that I thought about talking about. There's and then you get into the weird ones like the Dealer's Choice. You know, the guy sitting around the table playing cards with the devil and things like that. You know, it's and the innocence of that one chap who's not as savvy to conning people as the others are. He's the one that wins through at the end of it. You know, it's a great little morality tales they are. I said it before and I'll say it again, and you mentioned it earlier as well. These are the type of things that will get people thinking outside the box, you know, that's but not a box with a button on it, because if you press that,
that's right.
Oh. So unless there's anything else, I'll just say thank you so much for joining me, Andrew. It's been fascinating. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been fine. It's been great, and yeah, it's good to sort of knock heads together and see
Yeah,
what
yeah.
concepts kind of spill onto the table. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's good.
I'm hoping we can do it again. Yeah, maybe.
Definitely.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much for everybody supporting as well. I've recently, the first video that I did with Andrew, Star Trek Voyager, is creeping towards 1,000 views now. It's about 930 views. That's brilliant for the. Just recently hit my first milestone of 100 subscribers on on Electric Media Madness as well. So I truly appreciate that. Keep it going. Support for me and Andrew as well. If you're watching this on Andrew's channel, check the evidence. Please come over and visit Electric Media Madness. I won't bite. I won't bite. You know, give us a like, share, subscribe, and the same here. If you're a newbie to all this and you're just a sci-fi fan, and you know, go over to check the evidence and check it all out, because it's very much worth your time. It really is. And I'll say thank you again, Andrew, for joining me. Thank you all for enjoying me. You take care, everybody out there in this crazy world we're living in at the moment. And Andrew and I will see you again very, very soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.